The air inside the first-class cabin of Regal Horizon Flight 902 was pressurized and chilled, yet the glare Preston Montgomery shot at the teenager in seat 1A burned hotter than jet fuel. He didn't see a 17-year-old boy with headphones. He saw an error, a glitch in his exclusive platinum status world. When the senior flight attendant reached for the boy's wrist to physically remove him, she thought she was simply taking out the trash. She had no idea she was laying hands on the son of the woman who owned the very tarmac they were parked on. This isn't just a story about a stolen seat. It's about the catastrophe that follows when prejudice collides with absolute power. JFK. Airport was a chaotic symphony of rolling luggage, frantic announcements, and the distinct hurried rhythm of New York City. But inside the hull of the Boeing 777, designated for Regal Horizon Airlines, the world was silent and smelling of expensive leather and champagne. Jordan Banks adjusted the noise-canceling headphones over his ears, drowning out the low hum of the auxiliary power unit. At 17, Jordan had the kind of lanky, growing-too-fast build that made him slouch slightly to fit into spaces, but in seat 1A, a lie-flat pod with a privacy partition, he finally had room to stretch. He pulled the hood of his charcoal gray sweatshirt up over his head. It was a comfortable, oversized garment from a university gift shop, worn soft at the elbows. To the casual observer, he looked like any other teenager trying to disappear into his music. To the man currently boarding the aircraft, however, Jordan looked like a stain on a silk sheet. Preston Montgomery adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit as he stepped onto the plane. Preston was a man who wore his net worth like armor. He was 45, with silvering hair carefully gelled back, and a jawline that seemed permanently set in a clench of dissatisfaction. He held a platinum medallion status card in his hand, though he didn't need to show it. He expected the crew to know him by scent. "Good afternoon, Mr. Montgomery." The flight attendant at the door chirped her smile tight and practiced. "Welcome back to Regal Horizon. Seat 2A as usual. 2A. Preston stopped, his brow furrowing. "I specifically requested the bulkhead. 1A. I need the extra legroom for my briefcase setup." "I apologize, sir," the attendant said, glancing at her manifest. 1A was booked 3 weeks ago. The cabin is full today." Preston didn't respond. He simply brushed past her, marching into the first-class cabin with the entitlement of a man who had never been told no without firing someone shortly after. He stopped abruptly at the first row. There in the seat he considered his birthright was Jordan. Jordan had his eyes closed, head bobbing slightly to a bass line only he could hear. His sneakers, a rare vintage pair of Jordans that cost more than a mid-size sedan, were scuffed at the toe. His backpack was shoved haphazardly into the corner. Preston stared. He looked at the boy's dark skin, the hooded sweatshirt, the relaxed posture that screamed loitering rather than lounging to Preston's biased eyes. The narrative in Preston's head wrote itself instantly. Affirmative action upgrade. Employee non-rev ticket. Lucky lottery winner. "Excuse me," Preston said, his voice loud enough to cut through the ambient noise of the cabin. Jordan didn't move. The noise cancellation was excellent. Preston's face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. He leaned in, snapping his fingers directly in front of Jordan's face. "Hey, kid." Jordan flinched, his eyes snapping open. He pulled the headphones down around his neck, looking up with a mixture of confusion and teenage grogginess. Yeah. Can I help you? You're in my seat," Preston lied smoothly. It was a power move he'd used before. Confusion usually led to compliance. Jordan frowned, reaching into his pocket to pull out his boarding pass. He checked it, then looked back at the small brass placard on the suite wall. 1A. No, I think this is me. My ticket says 1A. Let me see that. Preston demanded, extending a hand. He didn't wait for permission. He snatched the fragile slip of paper from Jordan's grip. He scanned it. Jordan Banks, JFK to LHR, Seat 1A. The ticket was valid. But to Preston, it felt fraudulent. It didn't make sense. Kids didn't sit in international first class unless they were wearing blazers and accompanied by a nanny or a parent. This kid was alone, looking like he'd just walked off a basketball court in Queens. "Where are your parents?" Preston asked, dropping the ticket onto the boy's lap with a sneer. "They're around," Jordan said, his voice guarding a secret. "Look, man, I'm just trying to sleep before we take off. Can you chill?" "Chill." The word grated on Preston's nerves like sandpaper. "Don't speak to me like that," Preston snapped. He turned around, scanning the aisle for an ally. He found one in Brenda Gables. Brenda was the purser, the head flight attendant for the flight. She had been flying for 30 years and had developed a radar for trouble. Unfortunately, her radar was calibrated by decades of subtle prejudice and a desire to keep her high-tipping frequent flyers happy. She saw Preston Montgomery standing over a hooded teenager, and she immediately categorized the scene: valued customer versus disturbance. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Montgomery?" Brenda asked, rushing forward, her heels clicking sharply on the galley floor. "There is a massive problem, Brenda," Preston said, gesturing at Jordan as if presenting a dead rat. "I booked this seat. I always sit in 1A, and somehow this individual is occupying it. I suspect there's been a system error, or perhaps a security breach." Brenda looked at Jordan. She saw the hoodie. She saw the lack of eye contact. Jordan was looking out the window now, trying to ignore the man berating him. She made a snap judgment. "Sir," Brenda said, addressing Jordan with a tone that was technically polite, but dripped with ice. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Jordan sighed, picking the ticket up from his lap again. "I just showed him. It's 1A. Brenda took the ticket. She examined it under the light. It looked real. But in her mind, she was already running through scenarios. Maybe he printed a fake one. Maybe he swapped with someone. It was unheard of for a teenager to be flying solo in a $10,000 suite without a VIP protocol note on her manifest. She checked her tablet. Seat 1A Banks, J. No status listed. No VIP tag. Just a name. "Mr. Banks," Brenda said, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper meant to save face for him before she kicked him out. "How did you acquire this ticket?" Jordan looked at her, genuinely baffled. "My mom gave it to me." Preston let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "His mom? Did she use her miles from cleaning houses? Or did she find it on the floor?" The air in the cabin shifted. Several passengers in rows 2 and 3, a tech CEO named David and a fashion editor named Chloe, looked up from their screens, sensing the tension. They stayed silent, the bystander effect holding them in their luxury seats. Jordan's jaw tightened. The comment about his mother hit a nerve. He sat up straighter, his eyes hardening. "Watch your mouth." "Excuse me," Brenda interjected, stepping between them but facing Jordan. "You will not threaten other passengers on this aircraft." "He just insulted my mother," Jordan said, his voice rising slightly. "And I have a valid ticket. Why are you grilling me? Ask him for his ticket." Brenda bristled. "Mr. Montgomery is a global services member. I know who he is. I don't know who you are, young man. And quite frankly, your behavior is becoming aggressive." "Aggressive?" Jordan laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "I'm sitting down. He's the one standing over me screaming." "I am not screaming," Preston said calmly, adjusting his tie. "I am demanding that Regal Horizon maintain its standards. I paid $12,000 for a premium experience. I did not pay to sit next to a delinquent who probably snuck in during the pre-boarding chaos." Preston turned to Brenda, his voice dropping to a dangerous ultimatum. "Brenda, I want him moved. Put him in economy where he belongs. Or I'm calling the CEO. I played golf with the VP of Operations last week. Do you want me to mention your name? Brenda paled. She was 3 years away from retirement. She needed her pension. She looked at Jordan, a nobody in a hoodie. Then she looked at Preston, a man who could ruin her career with a single email. The choice to her was obvious. "Sir," Brenda said to Jordan, her voice stealing, "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things." Jordan stared at her. "You're joking, right? I have a ticket." "We have a situation of overbooking and seat duplication," Brenda lied, improvising rapidly. "And since Mr. Montgomery is a priority status member, he has the right to the seat. I can find you something in economy comfort." "I'm not moving," Jordan said firmly. "My mom is boarding soon. You can talk to her." "We don't have time to wait for your mother," Brenda snapped, checking her watch. "The doors close in 10 minutes. If you don't move voluntarily, I will have to classify this as a refusal to comply with crew instructions. That is a federal offense." "You're kicking me out because I'm black and he's rich," Jordan said plainly. He didn't shout it. He stated it as a fact. "Don't play the race card with me," Preston spat. "It's about class, and you clearly have none." "That is enough," Brenda commanded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small radio. "Captain, this is the cabin. We have a non-compliant passenger in 1A. I might need security at the gate." Jordan's eyes went wide. He wasn't scared of the flight attendant, but the threat of security police was different. He knew how these interactions ended for boys who looked like him. He pulled his phone out, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Mom, 911. They are trying to kick me off the plane." Row 1. He hit send. The message delivered just as Brenda reached out and grabbed his backpack strap. "Don't touch my stuff," Jordan said, yanking it back. "Then move," Brenda shouted, losing her professional veneer entirely. "Get up now. Make me," Jordan challenged, crossing his arms. Preston leaned down his face, inches from Jordan's ear. "You're going to regret this, boy. You're going to leave this airport in handcuffs, and I'm going to enjoy my champagne in your seat while you sit in a holding cell." "Mr. Montgomery, please take your seat in 2A for a moment while I handle this," Brenda said, trying to regain control. "I'm calling the gate agent." As Preston smirked and settled into the seat behind Jordan, stretching his legs aggressively into the gap, Jordan saw the 3 dots appear on his phone screen. His mother was typing. Then a text came through. "Don't move. I'm at the jet bridge." Jordan took a deep breath. He looked at Brenda, who was angrily whispering into the flight interphone, and then at Preston, who was already opening a magazine, acting as if the war was won. "You really shouldn't have done this," Jordan said softly. Preston didn't even look up. "Save it for the public defender, kid." Jordan sat back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He turned up his noise-canceling headphones not to listen to music, but to dampen the sound of the storm that was about to break. He watched the front door of the plane. The first twist of this knife was about to happen, but nobody in the cabin, least of all Brenda Gables or Preston Montgomery, knew who was walking down that jet bridge. They thought they were dealing with an unruly teen mom. They were expecting a woman who would beg or scream or make a scene they could mock. They weren't expecting the hurricane in Dior heels. The atmosphere inside the cabin had shifted from awkward tension to a suffocating, static-charged dread. The luxury of the first-class cabin, the scent of warm nuts, the soft, ambient lighting, the hushed tones of wealth, clashed violently with the raw, ugly reality unfolding in row 1. Brenda Gables stood by the galley partition, her arms crossed tight against her chest, her face a mask of self-righteous indignation. She had committed to a narrative. Now the boy was a threat. To back down would be to admit a mistake, and Brenda Gables did not make mistakes. Not in front of platinum members like Preston Montgomery. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit, ducking his head slightly under the doorframe. He was a man of few words, exuding the weary authority of a pilot who just wanted to push back from the gate and beat the incoming weather over the Atlantic. "What is the issue, Brenda?" Miller asked, his voice low, scanning the scene. "Disruptive passenger captain," Brenda said, pointing a manicured finger at Jordan. "Refusal to comply with crew instructions, verbal aggression, and he is occupying Mr. Montgomery's seat without authorization." Miller looked at Jordan. He saw a kid in a hoodie, slouching, clutching a phone. He looked at Preston, who was sitting upright, radiating the kind of litigious energy that airlines feared most. "Son," Miller said, stepping into the aisle, "I need you to grab your bag and step off the aircraft. We can sort this out at the podium." "I have a ticket," Jordan said, his voice shaking slightly. The adrenaline was starting to curdle into fear. "Why won't anyone look at my ticket?" "We've seen it," Preston interjected smoothly from behind. "It's clearly fraudulent. Or stolen. Captain, I've been flying this airline for 20 years. I have never seen security this lax. I feel unsafe." Unsafe. It was the magic word. In the post-9/11 world of aviation, unsafe was a kill switch for all logic and negotiation. Miller sighed. He didn't have time to be a detective. "Okay, Brenda, call Port Authority. I want him removed. Now." Jordan's thumbs hovered over his phone screen. "Where are you?" "Mom." 10 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots on the jet bridge echoed through the silence of the cabin. 2 Port Authority officers squeezed through the boarding door. One was older, with a thick mustache and a name tag that read O'Malley. The other was younger Diaz, looking nervous, but eager to assert control. "Who's the problem?" O'Malley asked, his hand resting casually, terrifyingly on his belt. "Row 1, Brenda said, stepping aside like a matador, opening the gate for a bull. "He refuses to leave." The officers marched down the short aisle. The space was cramped. To get to Jordan, they had to loom over him, blocking out the light. "Let's go, kid," O'Malley grunted. "Don't make this hard." Jordan held up his hands, palms open. "I'm not doing anything. I paid for this seat. I'm waiting for my mother." "You're trespassing on a federal aircraft once the captain tells you to leave," O'Malley said. He didn't wait for a response. He reached out and grabbed Jordan's upper arm. The grip was tight, bruising. Jordan flinched, pulling his arm back instinctively. "Don't touch me." "Resisting!" Diaz shouted, escalating the situation from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat. The 2 officers lunged. In the confined space of the first-class suite, it was a mess of limbs and shouting. They yanked Jordan out of the seat. His headphones clattered to the floor. His backpack was kicked aside. I'm not resisting, Jordan cried out, panic rising in his throat. He knew the script. He knew that if he moved the wrong way, he could die. He went limp, letting them drag him into the aisle. "Get him off my plane!" Preston yelled, standing up to get a better view. He had his phone out now, recording the incident. "Look at him, fighting animal." "Sir, sit down," Diaz barked at Preston, but he didn't stop dragging Jordan. They slammed Jordan against the bulkhead wall near the galley. O'Malley twisted Jordan's arm behind his back, forcing his wrist up toward his shoulder blades. The pain was sharp and blinding. "You have the right to remain silent." O'Malley droned, the metal cuffs clicking ominously. "Please," Jordan gasped, his face pressed against the plastic wall paneling. "Check the manifest, please." "Shut up," Brenda said, leaning in. "You had your chance to leave quietly. Now you're going to jail." From the third row, the fashion editor, Chloe, stood up. "Hey, that's a child. You're hurting him." "Sit down, ma'am, or you're coming off too," O'Malley shouted back. The cabin was in chaos. The illusion of civilized luxury had shattered. Jordan felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. Tears stung his eyes, not from pain, but from the humiliation. He was being treated like a criminal in front of 50 people, all because a man in a suit decided he didn't belong. Preston Montgomery was smiling. It was a small, tight smile of victory. He watched as the officers began to march Jordan toward the door. "That's what happens," Preston muttered to the empty air loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "Order is restored." As they reached the aircraft door, Jordan looked down the jet bridge. It was empty. His heart sank. She hadn't made it. He was on his own. "Move it," O'Malley shoved him forward. But just as Jordan's sneaker crossed the threshold from the plane to the bridge, a shadow fell over the entryway. The click-clack of heavy, purposeful footsteps stopped everyone cold. It wasn't the frantic run of a late passenger. It was the rhythmic, terrifyingly calm stride of someone who owned the ground she walked on. The woman blocking the exit of the jet bridge stood 5'10" in heels, but she filled the space like a monolith. Cassandra Banks was a vision of intimidating elegance. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that cost more than the annual salary of everyone in the flight crew combined. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, flawless bun. Her sunglasses were perched on her head, revealing eyes that were currently burning with a cold, nuclear fury. She didn't look at the police officers. She didn't look at Brenda. She looked directly at Jordan, taking in the handcuffs, the tear tracks on his face, the way his shoulder was hunched from the officer's grip. The air pressure in the jet bridge seemed to drop. "Take your hands off my son," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had the timbre of a gavel striking a sounding block. Officer O'Malley blinked, caught off guard. He was used to screaming mothers. He wasn't used to this. "Ma'am, step aside. This individual is under arrest for trespassing and resisting." "I said," Cassandra interrupted, stepping forward, forcing the officers to take a step back into the plane. "Take your hands off him, immediately." Brenda Gables rushed forward from the galley, sensing a new problem. "Ma'am, you cannot block the boarding door. You need to clear the area or we will have you removed as well. Who are you?" Cassandra finally shifted her gaze to Brenda. It was like a predator looking at prey that didn't yet know it was dead. "Who am I?" Cassandra repeated softly. She reached into her handbag, the officer's tensed hands drifting to their holsters. But she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a black leather lanyard with a heavy metallic ID card encased in titanium. She held it up. It wasn't a standard crew ID. It wasn't a pilot's badge. It was a solid black card with the Regal Horizon logo embossed in actual gold leaf, followed by a single stripe of iridescent purple, the color reserved for the board of directors. "I am Cassandra Banks," she enunciated every syllable. "I am the majority shareholder of the Horizon Group, the parent company of this airline. And unless you want to be working the fry station at a fast food joint in Jersey by tomorrow morning, you will release my son." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Brenda's face drained of color so fast she looked like she might faint. She stared at the badge. She knew the legend of the black titanium clearance. It was rumored to exist, but most employees never saw one. It meant the holder outranked the CEO. Officer O'Malley looked at the badge, then at Brenda. "Is this real?" Brenda couldn't speak. She just nodded a jerky, panicked motion. "Uncuff him," Cassandra commanded. O'Malley fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He unlocked the cuffs. Jordan rubbed his wrists, stepping quickly to his mother's side. Cassandra didn't hug him, not yet. She was in war mode. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder, turning her glare back to the group. "Now," Cassandra said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low register, "I want to know exactly why my 17-year-old son, who was traveling on a ticket issued personally by my office, is in handcuffs." Captain Miller, hearing the commotion, came back out of the cockpit. He saw the badge. He saw Cassandra. His eyes went wide. "Ms. Banks, we weren't informed you were flying today." "I wasn't," Cassandra said. "I came to drop off my son, but I received a distress text saying he was being assaulted by my own staff." "Assaulted?" Preston Montgomery's voice floated from the cabin. He hadn't seen the badge yet. He just heard a woman's voice and assumed the mother had finally arrived to beg. He stood up, adjusting his tie, walking toward the galley to witness the finale. "Lady, your son is a delinquent who stole a first-class seat," Preston sneered, stepping into the galley. "He assaulted the crew with his attitude. I suggest you take him and leave before I add you to my lawsuit." Cassandra looked past the captain, past the trembling flight attendant, and locked eyes with Preston. "And who might you be?" she asked. "Preston Montgomery." He puffed out his chest. "Platinum medallion. I practically pay the salaries of these people." Cassandra let out a short, dry laugh. It was a terrifying sound. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, stepping into the cabin, pulling Jordan with her. The police officers scrambled out of her way, pressing themselves against the wall. "You generate 0.0003% of this airline's revenue. I checked your file on my way over here. You buy discounted business class fares and upgrade using miles. You are not a customer. You are a liability." Preston's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" "You demanded my son be removed from seat 1A. Cassandra continued, walking closer to him. "Seat 1A, which I reserved for him because it is his birthday. You racially profiled a child, bullied a spineless crew into doing your dirty work, and wasted airport security resources." She turned to Brenda. "And you?" Brenda flinched. "Ms. Banks, Mr. Montgomery insisted. He said he felt unsafe." "Unsafe?" Cassandra raised an eyebrow. "Because a boy was wearing a hoodie. Did you verify his ticket?" I thought it was fake," Brenda stammered. "The system didn't show a VIP status." "Because I blocked the status so he could travel like a normal person," Cassandra snapped. "I wanted him to have a quiet flight. Instead, you showed him exactly what this company looks like underneath the marketing." Cassandra pulled out her phone. She didn't dial a number. She opened the internal executive app that controlled the airline's operations. "Captain Miller," Cassandra said, not looking up from her screen. "Yes, ma'am," the captain said, standing at attention. "Is this aircraft ready to fly?" "Yes, ma'am. We are fully fueled and catered." "Good," Cassandra said. She tapped her screen. "I am grounding this flight." A collective gasp went through the cabin. "Grounding it!" Preston shouted. "You can't do that. I have a meeting in London." "I can do whatever I want, Mr. Montgomery. I own the plane," Cassandra said calmly. "But I'm not grounding it for mechanical reasons. I'm grounding it for a personnel change." She looked at Brenda, then at the captain. "Captain, you are relieved of duty pending an investigation into your failure to protect a passenger," Cassandra said. "Brenda Gables, you are fired. Effective immediately. Retrieve your personal items and leave the aircraft." Brenda burst into tears. "Miss Banks, please, I have 30 years. I'm 3 years from my pension." "You should have thought about that before you put my son in handcuffs to please a bigot," Cassandra said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "Get off my plane." She turned to the police officers. "And you two, I suggest you file a report stating that this was a misunderstanding caused by the crew. Because if I see resisting arrest on my son's record, I will sue the Port Authority until the state of New York runs out of ink printing the settlement checks. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, ma'am," Officer O'Malley said, sweating profusely. "Come on, Diaz. We're done here." The police retreated. Brenda, sobbing hysterically, grabbed her purse and ran off the plane. Captain Miller hung his head, gathered his flight bag, and walked past them looking like a broken man. The cabin was silent. Jordan looked at his mother, awe written all over his face. He had seen her work before, but never like this. Never for him. "Now," Cassandra said, turning back to Preston Montgomery, who was now pale and trembling, realizing the magnitude of his error. What about me?" Preston stammered. I didn't know who he was. It was an honest mistake." Cassandra smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Oh, we're just getting started with you, Preston." The silence in the first-class cabin was heavy, the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot. But in this case, the weapon had been a black titanium ID card and a few softly spoken sentences. Preston Montgomery, a man who had spent the last 45 minutes expanding his chest and barking orders like a field marshal, now looked incredibly small. He was standing in the aisle, trapped between the imposing figure of Cassandra Banks and the row of seats filled with passengers who were no longer looking at their phones. They were watching him. "You said you were just getting started." Preston said, his voice cracking slightly. He tried to clear his throat to summon the arrogance that usually fueled him, but the tank was empty. "Look, Ms. Banks, surely we can come to an arrangement. I'm a businessman. I understand stress. I'm willing to overlook the theatrical nature of this misunderstanding." "Theatrical," Cassandra repeated, tilting her head. She took a step closer to him. The scent of her perfume, expensive, subtle, and sharp, wafted over him. "You called the police on a child. You called him a delinquent. You had him put in handcuffs because you wanted legroom." She looked down at the tablet in her hand. Her fingers moved with lethal precision. "Preston James Montgomery," she read aloud. "Account number 8890 Alpha Bravo. CEO of Montgomery Logistics, a mid-sized shipping coordinator in Delaware." Preston stiffened. "That is private information." "Not when it's in my database," Cassandra countered. "I see here you have accrued 450,000 miles. You're saving them for a family trip to Fiji next year, a second honeymoon." Preston's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Notes from our customer service line," Cassandra said breezily. "You apparently called 3 times to shout at an agent about blackout dates. You have a history of verbal abuse toward my staff, Mr. Montgomery. 14 documented incidents in 3 years. Usually we tolerate it because the customer is always right. But today," she tapped the screen once firmly. "What did you do?" Preston asked, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "I just deleted them," Cassandra said, showing him the screen. "All 450,000 miles. Gone." "You can't do that," Preston shrieked, his face turning purple. "That's theft. That's $40,000 worth of travel." "Read the Terms and Conditions Section 9, Clause C," Cassandra recited from memory. "Regal Horizon reserves the right to terminate any account and forfeit all accrued benefits if the member engages in conduct detrimental to the airline, its staff, or its passengers." She looked him dead in the eye. "You are detrimental, Preston." "I'll sue," Preston screamed. "I'll sue you personally." "Get in line," Cassandra said, bored. She tapped the screen again. "I've also flagged your passport number in our Global Alliance system. You are hereby placed on the no-fly list for Regal Horizon and all our partner carriers. That includes British Airways, Iberia, and Qantas. Good luck getting to London. I hear the swim is invigorating this time of year." Preston looked around the cabin, desperate for an ally. He looked at David, the tech CEO, in 2A. Are you going to let her do this? She's a tyrant. This is corporate overreach. David, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mixture of shock and awe, slowly picked up his noise-canceling headphones. He looked Preston in the eye, gave a small, dismissive shrug, and put the headphones back on. Preston turned to Chloe, the fashion editor in 3A. You saw it. The kid was aggressive. Chloe didn't speak. She just held up her phone. The camera lens was pointed directly at Preston. The red REC dot was blinking. Smile, Preston, Chloe said icily. You're going to be famous. Preston lunged toward her. Delete that. Cassandra moved faster than anyone expected. She stepped in front of Preston, blocking his path to Chloe. She didn't touch him, but her presence was a wall. If you touch another passenger, Cassandra whispered, I will not call the police. I will call my private security team. And they don't carry handcuffs. They carry non-disclosure agreements and very heavy flashlights. Preston froze. He realized finally that he had lost. The cabin was a hostile environment. The air was thin. His status was 0. Get your bag, Cassandra ordered. Preston reached up to the overhead bin with trembling hands. He pulled down his leather carry-on. He looked at seat 1A, the seat he had fought for, the seat that had cost him everything. Jordan was standing there, rubbing his wrists. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked tired. Preston started looking at the boy. Maybe he thought an apology would save his miles. Maybe he thought he could beg. Don't, Jordan said quietly. Just go. Gate agents are waiting for you at the top of the jet bridge to escort you out of the terminal, Cassandra said. Do not stop at the food court. Do not stop at the restroom. Leave my airport. Preston Montgomery adjusted his suit jacket, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. He lifted his chin, turned on his heel, and began the long walk down the aisle. It was the longest walk of his life. First class was silent, but as he passed through the curtain into business class, and then past the galley toward the exit, a low sound started. It was a slow clap. It started from a flight attendant in the back who had heard the commotion. Then a passenger joined in. Then another. By the time Preston reached the aircraft door, the sound of applause was ringing in his ears. They weren't clapping for him. They were clapping for his departure. He stepped onto the jet bridge into the waiting arms of 2 stern-looking gate agents and disappeared from the world of the elite forever. Inside the cabin, Cassandra let out a long breath. Her shoulders slumped just a fraction of an inch, the only sign that the confrontation had cost her anything. She turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay and the disruption. A fresh crew is on their way. We will have you in the air in 45 minutes. As compensation for this ordeal, every passenger on this flight will receive a voucher for a future round-trip ticket anywhere we fly. On the house. The tension in the cabin evaporated instantly. Smiles returned. The tech CEO gave a thumbs up. Cassandra turned to Jordan. The steel in her eyes melted away, replaced by a fierce, painful love. Are you okay? She asked, reaching out to touch his face. Jordan leaned into her hand, closing his eyes. Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks, Mom. I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried to keep my world away from you. I thought if I just bought the ticket and didn't put my name on the reservation, you could just be normal. I can't be normal here, Mom, Jordan said, looking at the empty seat where Preston had sat. Not when people like him are the gatekeepers. Then we change the gatekeepers, Cassandra said firmly. She guided him back to seat 1A. Sit. I'm going to stay with you until the new captain arrives. Then I have to go deal with the legal fallout of firing a union crew mid-shift. You're not coming? Jordan asked, a flash of disappointment in his eyes. I can't, she said. I have a board meeting in New York that I was already late for. But, when she smiled, I think you'll be safe now. I've put a note on the manifest. What does it say? It says, son of the boss. If he asks for a soda, give him the whole can. Jordan laughed. It was a weak laugh, but it was real. Cassandra kissed his forehead, straightened her blazer, and turned to leave. But she stopped at row 3A. Ms. Chloe, Cassandra said to the fashion editor. Chloe looked up, slightly startled. Yes, Ms. Banks. That video, Cassandra said. The one you recorded. I can delete it, Chloe said quickly. I didn't mean to pry. No, Cassandra said, a dark smile playing on her lips. Don't delete it. Upload it. Post it everywhere. Tag him. Tag the airline. Tag me. Chloe grinned, her thumbs already moving over the screen. With pleasure. The flight to London was uneventful, but only in the sense that the plane stayed in the air. Inside Jordan's mind, and on the ground below, a storm was brewing that made the earlier confrontation look like a light drizzle. The new crew was terrifyingly attentive. The new purser, a man named Timothy, treated Jordan like he was made of spun glass. He brought sparkling water before Jordan could even ask. He offered extra pillows, 3 different meal options, and checked on him every 15 minutes. Jordan sat in 1A, staring out the window at the clouds over the Atlantic. The physical cuffs were gone, but he could still feel the phantom weight of them on his wrists. He replayed the moment over and over, Preston's sneer, the officer's grip, the feeling of absolute powerlessness. He realized something profound at 35,000 feet. His mother's money could save him, but it couldn't hide him. Without the badge, without the title, he was just a target. He pulled out his phone. He had paid for the in-flight Wi-Fi. He opened Twitter X. The first thing he saw on the trending tab was #FirstClassRacist. He clicked it. The video Chloe had recorded was already at 4 million views. It was a masterclass in shaky cam justice. It started mid-argument, capturing Preston screaming, "I practically pay the salaries of these people," and ended with Cassandra's icy demolition of his miles and the applause as he walked off. The comments were a waterfall of fury and vindication. @FlyHigh9. Did she just delete his miles in real time? OMG, the power move. Queen. @Justice for Jordan. Imagine being so racist you lose your frequent flyer status and your dignity in 5 minutes. Karma is swift. @TechBroDave. I was on this flight. The guy was a nightmare. The kid was just chilling. The mom is Cassandra Banks. She owns the airline. Dude picked a fight with God. Jordan scrolled, feeling a strange mixture of validation and anxiety. His face was blurred in the video. Chloe had been respectful enough to focus on Preston, but everyone knew who his mother was now. Meanwhile, on the ground in New York, the fallout was hitting Preston Montgomery with the force of a freight train. Preston was sitting in the back of an Uber stuck in traffic on the Van Wyck Expressway. He had been escorted out of the terminal by security like a common criminal. He was trying to rebook a flight on his phone, but every app was giving him errors. Expedia booking failed. British Airways, user restricted. Delta transaction declined. Damn it! He slammed his phone against his knee. His phone rang. It was his office line. Montgomery Logistics, this is Preston, he barked. Preston, it's Sarah. His assistant's voice was trembling. Preston, what is happening? The phones haven't stopped ringing for 20 minutes. What are you talking about? People are calling and screaming, Sarah said. They're canceling contracts. The Henderson account just pulled out. They said they don't do business with what, Sarah? With viral bigots. Preston, have you checked your email? Preston minimized the call and opened his email. His inbox was flooding. Hate mail, obviously, but worse notifications from his business partners. Subject: immediate termination of partnership. Subject: vendor review, urgent. Subject: LinkedIn account, flagged for review. He opened LinkedIn. His profile, which he had meticulously curated for a decade, was being bombarded. Someone had found the video. Someone had identified him. The internet sleuths had done in 1 hour what the police would take weeks to do. They had found his company, his public posts, his old tweets. His reputation wasn't just damaged, it was being nuked. Preston felt his chest tighten. He couldn't breathe. The walls of the Uber felt like they were closing in. He rolled down the window, gasping for air, the smell of exhaust fumes filling his lungs. "Driver," Preston gasped. "Turn around. Take me home." "I can't turn around here, buddy," the driver said, looking in the rearview mirror. Then the driver squinted. He looked at his phone, which was mounted on the dashboard, playing a video on a news loop. He looked back at Preston. "Hey," the driver said, his voice hardening. "Wait a second. You're that guy, from the plane." Preston shrank back into the seat. "Just drive." "I saw that video," the driver said, slowing the car down. "My nephew looks like that kid you tried to arrest." "I didn't try to arrest anyone," Preston lied. "Please just take me to Connecticut." The driver pulled the car over onto the shoulder of the highway. The hazard lights clicked on. "Get out," the driver said. "What? You can't leave me here. It's the highway." "It's my car," the driver said, turning around. "And I have the right to refuse service to anyone who makes me feel unsafe." "Isn't that what you said?" Preston stared at him, mouth agape. The words tasted like ash. "Get out." Preston Montgomery, former Platinum Medallion member, former CEO of a functioning logistics company, opened the door. He stepped out onto the dirty shoulder of the Van Wyck Expressway. It began to rain. As the Uber sped away, splashing dirty puddle water onto his Italian suit, Preston realized the true power of the blacklist. It wasn't just about planes. It was about exile. Back in the sky, Jordan watched the sunset from seat 1A. The Wi-Fi pinged again. A new email from his mom. Subject: "One more thing. Jordan, I know today was hard. I'm sorry. But I want you to know something. I didn't just fire Brenda and ban Preston to punish them. I did it to show you that you never have to accept less than what you deserve. You belong in first class. You belong in the boardroom. You belong wherever you want to be. P.S. I looked into Preston's business holdings. Horizon Group has a shipping contract with his firm for our cargo division. I just canceled it. It represented 60% of his annual revenue. Happy birthday. Love, Mom." Jordan smiled. He put his headphones back on. The bass kicked in. He reclined the seat all the way back, closed his eyes, and for the first time that day, he finally fell asleep. But the story wasn't over. The video had done more than destroy Preston. It had awoken something else. The viral nature of the incident had caught the attention of someone far more dangerous than a logistics manager in Delaware. Deep in the corporate offices of a rival airline, a man named Sterling Vance, CEO of Aero Global, was watching the clip on a loop. He didn't care about the racism. He didn't care about the boy. He cared about the ID card Cassandra had flashed. The black titanium clearance. "She used the override protocol," Vance muttered to his VP. "She exposed herself." "So?" the VP asked. "So?" Vance smiled, lighting a cigar. "That card gives her absolute authority, but it also links her personally to every liability on that aircraft. If we can prove she abused her power to bypass federal security protocols, We can ground her entire airline. And the drama on Flight 902 was resolved, but the war for the skies was just beginning. While Jordan slept over the Atlantic, the ground beneath the bank's empire began to shake. Arthur Gould, CEO of Aero Global and Horizon's fiercest rival, saw the viral footage not as a justice piece, but as a weapon. "She broke protocol," Gould murmured to his general counsel in Chicago, watching Cassandra flash the black titanium badge. "She overrode federal officers. That's a national security violation. Leak it. Frame it as a billionaire playing by different rules. If we strip her license, I buy her routes for pennies." By the time Jordan's plane descended into Heathrow, the narrative had flipped. He turned on his phone, expecting victory. Instead, he found Hatchet Boycott, Horizon. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire tycoon bypasses, security, and FAA launches investigation." Jordan felt sick. He had just wanted a seat, but now he was watching his mother's legacy crumble. Meanwhile, in a dingy motel in Queens, a disgraced Preston Montgomery stared at the same news nursing cheap whiskey and a shattered ego. His phone rang. "Mr. Montgomery," a smooth voice intoned. "This is Arthur Gould. I believe we share a common enemy." Preston sat up. "The woman who ruined me." "I can help you get it all back," Gould promised. "I'm launching a class action lawsuit. I need you to testify that you saw Cassandra Banks physically threaten the police, that she acted like a maniac." "But she didn't," Preston hesitated. "Do you want to live in this motel forever? Or do you want $10 million and a seat on my board?" Preston looked at his stained cuffs. Survival outweighed truth. "Tell me what to say." 2 days later, an emergency oversight hearing was set in Washington, D.C. If the Aviation Ethics Committee found Cassandra in violation of the Secure Skies Act, she would lose her operating license. In the Capitol holding room, Cassandra looked tired but resolute. Jordan sat beside her, adjusting a suit she'd bought him in London. "Mom," Jordan said quietly, "blame me. Tell them I was acting out. Don't lose the company for this." Cassandra turned her eyes blazing with fierce affection. "Jordan, look at me. This company is just planes and fuel. I would burn every jet in the hangar to the ground before I let a man like Preston Montgomery put chains on you again." "But Gould is going to win," Jordan insisted, showing her the news feed. "Preston is testifying that you assaulted the cops." Cassandra smiled, a cold, calculated expression of a grand master seeing a checkmate. "Arthur Gould is a smart man, but he forgot one thing." "What?" "He forgot who built the security system he uses on his own planes." The bailiff opened the door. "Ms. Banks, the committee is ready." The hearing room in D.C. was a pressure cooker of flashing cameras and murmuring press. Arthur Gould sat smugly beside a polished, rehearsed Preston Montgomery. Senator Higgins banged his gavel. "Ms. Banks, you are accused of utilizing unauthorized executive clearance to obstruct federal law enforcement. Mr. Gould alleges your actions on Flight 902 compromised national airspace safety." Gould stood, buttoning his jacket. "It's simple, Senator. Ms. Banks used her wealth to intimidate police. My witness, Mr. Montgomery, will testify that he was terrified for his life when she stormed the aircraft with a security detail." "Lies!" Preston shouted, emboldened by the cameras. "She had thugs. She threatened to kill me. She's a maniac." The room buzzed. The narrative was working. Cassandra looked like a tyrant. "Ms. Banks." Higgins peered over his glasses. "Do you have a defense?" Cassandra stood alone. She walked to the center of the room, placing a small silver flash drive on the podium. "Senator," she began, her voice calm. "Mr. Gould believes the black titanium badge is merely a status symbol. He is mistaken. The titanium level was designed after 9/11 as a mobile black box. When activated, it becomes a walking surveillance unit, encrypting high-fidelity audio and video directly to the cloud. Gould's face went ashen. "I have the recording of the entire interaction," Cassandra said. "But I have something even more interesting." She plugged in the drive. The screens flickered to life. First, the video showed the jet bridge Cassandra walking alone, calm and collected, contrasting sharply with Preston's screamed racial slurs. The room fell silent, but Cassandra wasn't finished. "That clears the assault charge. Now here is the audio from yesterday." The screen went black, but the audio was crystal clear, the ambient noise of a restaurant. Gould's voice. "Preston, you need to lie. Say she hit the officer." Preston's voice. "But she didn't." Gould's voice. "I don't care. I'm paying you $10 million to bury her. Once she loses her license, Aero Global buys her routes for pennies." Senator Higgins turned slowly to Gould, his face red with fury. "Mr. Gould, did you just conspire to commit perjury before a congressional committee?" Gould knocked his chair over, panicking. "That recording is illegal, wiretapping. It's a federal security device authorized by the FAA. Cassandra cut in a sharp smile playing on her lips. "You signed the bill that made my badge legal 3 years ago, Arthur. You built the trap yourself." As Capitol Police moved in, handcuffing a sobbing Preston and a stunned Gould, the room erupted. Cassandra turned back to Jordan, who was watching the Horizon stock price rocket upward on his tablet. "How did you get that audio?" Jordan whispered. "You weren't near them yesterday." "Brenda Gables was," Cassandra winked. "She begged for her job back. I told her if she wore a wire to her meeting with Gould, I'd let her keep her pension." 6 months later, JFK Airport was bustling. Jordan Banks walked through the terminal, not in a hoodie, but in the crisp uniform of a Horizon Flight Academy cadet. He stopped at the gate for Flight 902. The agent smiled. "Seat 1A, Mr. Banks. Enjoy." Jordan took the ticket, but paused. Near the counter stood a teenager, maybe 16, clutching a standby slip and looking anxiously at the floor, the universal look of someone who felt they didn't belong. Jordan walked over. "Flying standby." The kid nodded nervously. "Hoping for a seat in the back." Jordan looked at his first-class ticket, then at the boy. He remembered the feeling of being small-judged and unwanted. "Here," Jordan said, swapping his ticket with the kid's slip. "What, no, this is first class." "Take it." Jordan smiled, adjusting his cap. "If anyone asks if you belong there, tell them you own the seat." As the kid walked toward the front of the plane in disbelief, Jordan headed for the back, whistling. He didn't need 1A to feel important anymore. He knew that real power wasn't in the seat you sat in, but in the hand you extended to pull others up. The story of Jordan and Cassandra Banks serves as a powerful reminder that prejudice is fragile when faced with truth. Preston Montgomery and Arthur Gould thought their status could crush a boy, but they underestimated a mother's ferocious love. In the end, the black titanium badge wasn't the hero, it was merely the tool that exposed the rot beneath the expensive suits. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered first class. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please destroy that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder to stand up for themselves, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, Brian. A check lai title file Lu Ko Jung title can viet.